Can I have a mover and a second to reconvene Austin and Richie? And with that, I'll turn it over to Director Schmidt to start off the conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to members of council. Just before we get into the 2018 and 6-year capital plan, I just wanted to provide a bit of an update to members of council. I know at the beginning of the last meeting there was some discussion about kind of where we're at, and so I gave every member of council a copy of this presentation. There's a couple of slides here. And I just wanted to kind of walk through kind of where we're at and answer any questions that the council may have. So you may recall back on November 15th, staff came to council with a proposal of a net levy requirement. This includes assessment growth but does not include any program changes. So the base, if you will, request was for $337,000 or a 3.1% increase. On November 27th, council essentially decided not to include the program change for the SSEA. So you're probably questioning why the $7,000 is not there. The $7,000 doesn't have an impact on the 337. The $7,000 has an impact on the program change component. So we have removed the $7,000 from the program change component. And then there was also the increase in the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund's revenue of $181,000, or give or take. So the net levy requirement, or the revised net levy requirement as of November 29th was $155,000, or 1.43% increase. Again, that does not include program changes at that stage. If we flip to the next slide. Try. Oh. Thank you. So again, starting with the 155 net levy requirement, on December 4th, council made a few amendments. They had a resolution or a motion to add the extended hours for the library, which equated to a $46,000 increase. And then there was the removal of the Celebrate Springwater event for a reduction of approximately $40,000. And then there was an amendment to the deposit for the rental sweeper of $20,000. So those changes equated to a reduction of approximately $13,000. And overall, the revised net levy requirement was reduced to $142,000 or 1.31. Again, that does not include some of the other program changes, which we'll be asking council to address later in our meeting today. So on the last slide, there we go. So on the last slide, again, assuming that the township's portion is at 1.31% increase, that would equate to approximately $19 for an average residential property. What does that mean from a blended, there was a change to the policing charge at our last meeting. So instead of a $226 charge for 2018, it would be a $228 charge. So instead of a $10 increase, a $12 increase. And again, this is for a residential property. So essentially, for an average residential property, you're looking at approximately a $44 increase, or 1.2% blended. And again, that essentially brings us to where we are today. It does not include the other program changes that will need to be addressed at today's session.
Questions, Deputy Mayor Allen?
Thank you, Mayor French. Director Schmidt, so the other program changes, which although we haven't passed by motion, we have discussed each of them. You don't have a summation of what that looks like when added to this?
Director Schmidt?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Deputy Mayor Allen. No, I guess the reason being is we didn't want to presuppose that those were going to be all included. So really, I guess it's up for discussion as to whether or not council, depending on where you sit with regards to those program changes, some may be included, some may not be. We didn't want to assume that all of them were going to be included. So,
have you done a calculation to be able to refer to the number?
We have a spreadsheet set up that, to the extent that members of council add and or remove, whether it be program changes or other motions that come forward today, we do have a spreadsheet set up so that we can track that and provide that information to council as we walk through today's session.
So, are you able to tell us, using that, what the bottom line would look like should all of the program changes that we discussed be added?
I don't have it right in front of me. If we have a recess at some point this morning, I can provide that to you. I don't have it right in front of me. I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
Councillor Austin?
So just help me understand what Deputy Mayor Allen was saying. That 1.20, when you're saying it's without program changes, that means without the changes to the library?
No.
So it's not, it is in there or it's not?
Look at page 3.
Yeah, that,
Those are the ones that are included. It's the other ones
okay. So the library is in there already, but I guess the Springwater splash pad isn't because it.
Let's have Director Schmidt address the questions, please.
That's what I was asking, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Austin. So the program changes that council has already passed a resolution or a motion on, those are included. So the
Okay.
ones being the SSEA as well as the library is included in that 1.2 blended.
Okay, thanks.
Your
That's-
question about the splash pad, at this stage, no motion has been, there's been a motion to move that splash pad in regards to adding any type of operating costs
Okay.
for that. So right now, there is no tax impact to move that splash pad from 2023 to 2018.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Councillor Hanna?
Thank you, Mayor. Could we get some clarification how late we're planning on going today? Is this another all-day, or are we going to quit at noon?
I think it's up to the availability. I know Councillor Ritchie has already informed us he needs to leave at 11:30 or 11, Councillor Ritchie?
11:30.
11:30. And when do other people need to leave? Because that'll determine, I guess, when we will end.
I would be happy to leave when Councillor Ritchie leaves, if everybody's agreeable.
I think we'd like to progress as far as possible, but I guess we can see where it goes as we go through this. And maybe I'll mention it now. One of the suggestions I made, because it would be nice to kind of bring some conclusion to this by the end of the year, and if people are agreeable, if we have to leave earlier today, would council be agreeable? I know it's going to be a busy day, but on December 20th, maybe we do the same as we did before our council meeting. We'll meet if it's possible, and I'd have to go to finance and our clerk from 3 to 6 to maybe wrap it up. Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you, Mayor French. Typically, when the budget comes back to council during the meeting, we have a presentation available to staff. So is that, or to the public? So is that enough time for the finance department to put something together to show the public what we've come up with if we've done this from 3 on that day of?
Director Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Coghlan. You're correct. It may be difficult to prepare a full-blown presentation, but again, depending on the nature of the changes, we could have the information available. It might just not be in a nice, neat package for the public at that stage. Any changes that council makes, we will make the changes and provide the information on our website and be available. But again, depending on the level of changes that could occur on the 20th, if we move that way, we might not have enough time to do a full-blown presentation, if you will. So,
And maybe I should clarify my point. I'd like to see us finish our work on the budget, and if we are not able to pass it on December 20th, I don't have an issue with that. It's just that I would like to be us going into the new year with actually knowing what we're going to do, and if we pass officially the budget on January meeting, I don't have an issue with that. I just think it's appropriate that we are responsible councillors and that attempt to kind of conclude the budget discussions and resolutions by the end of the year. That's all I'm suggesting. I'm not suggesting it'd be nice to be able to do it because I know that was a target, but we might not be able to. So that's the only reason I'm suggesting that tentatively, if we do want to leave earlier today and we don't have a quorum, then Yeah, yes, can we have another session? And I'd just like some general feedback on doing it on December 20th so we can have a nice Christmas, everybody. I'll go to Councillor McConkey and then back to Councillor Coghlan.
I'm fine with when you clarified, so I think that we could wrap it up. We might just have some stuff, like you say, tie it up in January, but that's worst case scenario.
Councillor Coghlan?
When is the staff luncheon?
That day, that's what I'm saying, it's a busy day.
I'm curious if there's another day available. I think that with the staff luncheon and council meeting that evening, if there's still a week in between this week and then. So if council's agreeable to a day next week, that way it would alleviate the 20th.
Yeah, I was just, quite honestly, I was trying to be cognizant of councillors' time and that we can, if it'll be a busy day, but at least it's not another day. But again, that's the will of council. I know it'll be busy, but it'll be kind of wrapped up. Councillor Austin?
I'm flexible with what you're suggesting. I'm fine with that.
Deputy Mayor Allen?
Next week is a relatively light week, so I'd be good on Wednesday. I'd prefer to see it next Wednesday, the 13th.
Any other comments? Councillor Ritchie?
I support what the deputy mayor said. I'm available next Wednesday to do it, to have our luncheon and then go into, I think there might be a few of us snoozing along here, so.
Councillor Austin?
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I'm not available next Wednesday. I'm fine for the 20th.
Councillor Hanna?
I'm not available next week.
Okay.
I've sort of made plans next week.
So we can discuss when we're going to do it later. We can do today's now.
Yeah, but I would prefer a kind of some feeling for where we're going. And so it was suggested, what's that, 13th? Actually, I know CEO Brindley and I, we have the CPAC meeting all morning and luncheon, so I would not be available in the morning. Thank you. Okay, but you're right, we can discuss it tentatively. I'm suggesting December 20th prior to our council meeting. We'll see where we go today. So back to you, Director Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before we dig into, well, actually, I think we left off on the Parks and Recreation projects of the 2018 capital budget, and I believe before I kind of pass things back to council, there was some comments made by Councillor Hanna regarding the Tree Nursery Sports Park North exit road, as well as the outdoor shed, and whether or not those could be eligible for DCs, and it was a great comment. And so the first item with regards to the exit road, we have, well, actually both items we've talked to our consultant, and we're of the opinion, or staff is of the opinion, that the north exit road could be rolled into the Ball Diamond project and essentially become eligible for DCs, and by doing so would alleviate $25,000 on the tax increase for 2018. So if council is agreeable to that, then we'll do that. The other item, the outdoor shed, is a little bit grayer in the sense that the outdoor shed is not essential for the Ball Diamond project, and so it's staff's opinion that project would not be eligible for DCs, and so we're not recommending any changes to that project at this stage. So with that, I will hand it back to members of council, or to yourself, Mr. Mayor, and we can plug through the rest of the capital.
Okay, so let's focus on, do we want to do it one by one? Trail development, and maybe ask questions, and Director Belcourt can respond to those questions. Any questions on the trail development? Right now, the amount is $30,000 in this. Councilman McConkey?
I'd just like to know if there's going to be some more trail like what you mean by trail development, and if there will be any in the south end. I know a lot has, so I just wondered what's going on.
Director Belcourt?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor McConkey. At this time, we're still focused on addressing the gaps in the North Simcoe Rail Trail, specifically between Floss 10 and County Road 6, and the section at County Road 6 to where the township trail actually begins. There is a land issue now with a new property owner. Been working with the county on that extensively over the last couple of years. I think we're getting close to being able to address both those items. As far as the south end goes, we continue to do trail maintenance, and if we need to top up any of the areas with the limestone screenings, we will be doing that. As you may recall, council approved a new piece of equipment 2 years in the 2016 budget for trail maintenance, and it is working really well, and we're getting a lot of good use out of it. So that's the extent of the trail maintenance we've got planned for the south end.
Follow up?
So with the 30,000, is that some land acquisition in there? Because we put 30,000, I believe, last year, didn't we? So I just wondered what's really, is it, are you changing the surface on the trail in the north?
Director Belcourt?
Thank you, Your Worship. It would not include land acquisition. That is still a ways out there. It would be to develop the trail section where we've been cut off at County Road 6 to make, to go around the property that was purchased and where the Snowmobile Club have an easement. So we're having to make modifications in that area. Plus a large section of the north is still does not have the limestone screenings, predominantly through between Elmville and Floss 8, which we've acquired as part of the Gallo development.
Continue.
As you know before, and it's part of a trail, the Parr Boulevard was going to have a trail, and we've had discussions where the trail would be leading to a busy road, and that we would be speaking with the residents to see what they want in the Parr thing. So I would really like, next year, I want to close that project. It was here when Harold Parker was representing us as a hall board. It's not on the capital project list for Parks and Rec. I know every year I sort of bring it up and we carry it over and we show the money associated. I just like to show that that money's there and that project's going to be completed next year.
You're speaking about I guess the reserve money that was there, and I think the consideration was going, and I'm not sure what feedback we've got. I think we did go to the park community. How would we better use those funds, because the trail connection is not going to work? I think there's an agreement on that, even by the residents. So would it be worthwhile just a one-page report coming back to council, just clarifying, okay, it's not going to be used for, and I'm jumping when you care to, Councilor McConkey, but it's not going to be used for kind of a trail extension, that it's going to be used for particular uses in the Parr Boulevard area. I think that's kind of the direction we're going, and maybe you can clarify that further, Director Belcourt.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the council, based on our discussions with yourself and Councilor McConkey and the residents, we're in agreement that the trail connection isn't going to work, and the residents we're going to look at, or we're going to pool the residents in the area to see what additions they would like to have in the Vesper Downs Park. And you're correct, that money is sitting in a reserve dedicated for that specific area and can only be used for that purpose. So when we bring a report back, we can bring it back with the recommendation that the project be funded, whatever the project may be, would be funded with the reserve funds, and that council is the only ones that can have to authorize that use.
Councilor McConkey?
The reason I want it on the capital plan and maybe just show it carry forward, because I won't be sitting at this table next year. Some of the rest of us may not either. And something can get lost, and it's been lost for a long time in the woods, and it needs to be done. The developer paid for it, and we got to action it. So I'd really like it, at least in the capital program, so that a new councillor coming in understands that that money's there and that the project's going. Because who knows, with all the projects now being presented for 2017 if we'll finish them all and what the priorities will be, but I hope that that becomes a priority.
Actually, I'm going to go to Director Schmidt on this one. Is there any reason in this capital, like that it could not show up each year or in the 6th year, like a TBA, and make a note where the funding would be coming from? Is that possible, just so it doesn't fall off kind of the page?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to members of council. So in the 2017 capital budget, there was a project, 2017-37, which was a trail linkage for Parr Boulevard to the Grenfell Community Center. There was essentially $10,000 in the 2017 budget for that project. If council wishes to, again, I assume that's what we're talking about. If council wishes to add that back into the 2018 or the 6-year capital plan, again, I don't see any reason why we couldn't do that.
Yeah, I think the point is, and it's a very good point, the least of it remains as a line item, and quite honestly, until the residents decide it could theoretically get shifted, but at least it's coming from a reserve. It's not coming from tax dollars, I think, which is the important point. So wherever it shows up, and maybe it's an asterisk in your reserve, and it shows up at the bottom. And I think that way, it'll just be there. So it's not going to have any tax impact. But okay. And would that work for you, Director Belcourt?
Yes.
Good. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions on, because we talked about trail, do we want to go through each of them by line and ask questions? Is there any other questions on the trail development? Okay. Playground upgrades, questions on that? I know this is part of an ongoing program. Councilor McConkey?
I know that we're trying to make more accessibility in our parks, and I understand that most years in the spring, there's usually funding and grants for accessibility, and I'd really like to see part of the Parr, because it would cost a lot, part of the Parr Park, and as well a park in Elmvale because of the seniors and that, or somebody. But with disability, what happens is that you want to be included into the park action, but there's nowhere you can wheel and sit there and watch, like especially at Parr, there's nowhere you can, I'm just using that as an example. We have 3 people in a wheelchair there, and there's nowhere way that they can come and wheel up and sit by a table, and I know that there's certain tables that are designed that you can wheel up. So I would just like to start to focus towards a little bit more towards accessibility, or apply for grants in accessibility. Maybe Councillor Austin knows about that or can follow up to in the spring, but I have written a letter to the federal government asking if there was, and they told me that it comes in the spring. So I'd really like us as staff to do something towards accessibility.
Director Belcourt, do you have any comments? Obviously, you're very close to accessibility going down the road, how that's going to be incorporated into our recreation?
Thank you, Worship. Yes, we do generally apply for accessibility grants. As Councilor McConkey stated, any new park now does require to meet the AODA code requirements. So anything moving forward with complete replacements or net new parks must meet all the accessibility requirements, which means pathways, trails, accessible playground areas, structures and areas. And we are working towards that, and we do look for the grants opportunities for that. I will note we did just complete the renovation of the fall protection surface at Durham Park this fall. It's our first fully accessible playground now. As far as the playground structure and the area around it, we do have some minor cleanup to do in the spring and create the pathways to it. But it is truly our first accessible playground. All
right. I actually, instead of just kind of going, is there anything on there that people want to discuss instead of me going line by line? Is there something that jumps out at you? Well, I'll throw something out and then we'll see where it goes. The ball diamonds, obviously, they're scheduled for this year. And my only question is, I know the ball diamonds, I guess if you look at the long-term plan, was based also on growth in the south end, which has been delayed 2, 3, whatever years. Should there be a consideration of shifting that, because it appears we're going to take on the cost of the kind of the splash pad in Elmville? And maybe I'll just throw out a question, and then we can have lots of other questions. If we do both of them this year, where's the money coming from, Director Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to members of council. So if both projects, the splash pad and the ball diamonds, were to be included in 2018, they both, from a funding perspective, would be funded from DCs or eligible to be funded from DCs. With that said, we don't have all of the DCs available to us in 2018 for both projects. So we would have to consider other funding sources to be able to do both. And I think based on the discussion that we had at the last meeting, staff is of the opinion, I think, that both projects could be put into the 2018 capital budget. That would give direction to staff to essentially proceed with both projects. We would be coming back to council with reports, obviously because of the magnitude of the projects. Our procurement bylaw would require us to come back with a recommendation report. At that time, we could secure or provide options as to how these projects could be financed. And in some regards, it may require some internal financing, whether it be, we had discussions about the Hydro Reserve Fund, whether it be fully funded from the Parkland Reserve Fund. We could provide further options at that time, but essentially, both projects could remain in the 2018 capital budget. Again, staff could come back once we tender, we'll know whether or not the costs are in line with what we've budgeted as well. So at that time, council will know, are there savings, or are we in a position where the projects are going to come in over what we budgeted? So again, I think we could have that discussion about the financing piece when we have further information on the true costs of the projects.
But just so we're ahead of the game, what is the reserve right now? How much?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to members of council. So we're projecting that the reserve would be just over $700,000 at the end of this year. However, when you take into account the draw from roughly it'd be a little bit more than $450,000 for the ball diamonds, as well as $315,000 from the splash pad, as well as I believe there's a couple other fleet projects that may draw, fleet or other parks and rec projects that may draw on DCs. That would put us in a bit of a deficit on that DC. We are projecting that deficit would only probably be for a 1 or 2 year span. So again, that's where we're thinking that both projects could proceed. It just means that we would probably have to do some internal financing, with the idea that you could borrow from the Hydro Reserve Fund, or you could borrow from the Parkland Reserve Fund, with the intent that as we collect the DCs, we would pay those, whether it be the Parkland Reserve Fund and or the Hydro Reserve Fund, we would pay back those reserve funds from the DC when we collect it. So you're not necessarily out of pocket, if you will. It's just an interim financing solution.
Okay, no, that's good, because we're aware of that. And maybe to start the conversation, Director Belcourt, it is in the budget, it was in the long-term plan. What's your thinking? Is it something we should do now? And I know you provided some information on usage and that. Like if you were the ultimate decision maker, would you do it now, or would you delay it a year? And as I said, I just throw that out as a broad question, and because you're closer to the action than I certainly am.
Thank you, Your Worship, through the council. Just based on the amount of inquiries we get for field use and the lack of availability and the potential to host many more tournaments throughout the year, which would also increase significant revenues. You know, if there were the 4 diamonds in to complete the pinwheel, I think it would be a revenue positive venture for the municipality. It would certainly offset any operating costs associated with the facilities, plus in turn be able to provide additional revenues to reinvest into the facilities, which is required. So at the end of the day, I do believe it would be a positive move moving forward. It would create a venue, and then as the municipality grows and there's more demand from within the municipality, not that there isn't now, although many of the groups are classed as a Barrie League, many Springwater residents participate in those leagues, both at this site and the Barrie Sports Complex across the road as part of going back and forth between the two.
Thank you. That gives me a good overview. Councillor Austin?
Thank you very much. I appreciate the explanation about whether or not we're able to afford this or finance this from Director Schmidt and Director Belcourt. What I want to add is that just as we, I think, are investing in the splash pad for the benefit, the health of our children, the fitness of our children, and the social fitness or the social well-being and mental well-being of the adults who take the children there. I like the idea of the baseball diamonds because I've heard in the last month or so about the growing demand for baseball diamonds, the growing interest in slow pitch among, and I think it's geared for young adults, say between 20 and 40, roughly that demographic. And I like the idea of investing in the health of that group, the fitness level of that particular group, just like we've done for the children. And we're going to be doing this for adults as well. So if we can afford this, I'm in favor of this one.
Thank you. Any other comments on the, Councillor Hanna?
Thank you. I think what I understand is that this is revenue generating, and it's not something that we're just doing for people to use for free. And as Mr. Belcourt explained the other night, I hope that we rent it for the costs and residents don't have to subsidize some of the costs of using those fields, that they're totally paid for by the users.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. No, I think that was a good explanation, and I don't think anybody has a particular issue with it. I was just wondering more timing, but that's fine. Is there any other items on here that we'd like to discuss? Councillor McConkey.
Facility signage. Where were you thinking with the facility signage? And I also have a thought on that. Maybe I should tell you my thoughts. Where I'm seeing is that there's a lot of activity at the different communities, and we're wanting to promote activities at the community halls. But I know to try to put, and it's sad, like we did put $3,000 towards those signs that people can put the letters up and stuff like that. But the people putting those letters up, it's a chore. Like for Mike to go down to Grenfell and put up the sign for the church that, you know, they're having a church dinner, he has to go in, try to lay out all the things. It's cold. They got to pull down the screen. It's not easy. And if we're going to invest in signage, and last time I heard, you know, we're getting at the smaller areas, like parks that we sort of know it's a park, or we know it's not really the facility. So I want to see where they are. But I'd like to see sort of signage that can help the community halls, like the electronic signs, so that they can advertise, so that something here can be driven. We're not relying on a volunteer to go out there in the cold and change these signs, and it's hard to get a volunteer to do it. It's difficult. it's not a fun job. So I'd just like to see that money help our community halls in signage that is electronic.
Maybe Director Belcour, you want to talk about general signage as like, I guess, event promotion, electronic signs? I think you were doing some legwork on that. Maybe you'd like to comment on that?
Thank you, Your Worship. There have been several requests from various communities to install electronic signage, some on a partnership proposals, I believe are going to come forward. Electronic signage has come a long way since in a very short period of time. I know we did speak about it last year, and I believe it is possible to add the electronic signage to the existing signs at many of the facilities. That I would have to do some further investigation on, and if it's council's wish, I could do more investigation on that and report back and see what's available within the 37.5 that's allocated in the budget proposal.
Okay. If we put aside the electronic signs for a second, what was this 37, basically dedicated to the regular signage?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, it would be a continuation of the existing signage program that was approved by the previous council.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Allen?
That covered my question. I thought the 37.5, because it stretches out each year. I thought it was a continuation of the, so I guess my question is, we had some discussion about the applicability of that or the agreement by this council to continue with that signage master plan last year. What's the feeling of council to just continue with that and look at it on a sort of case-by-case basis each year, or? Well, I guess Director Belcourt, so your intention is to do what with that 37.5 based on the signage master plan for 2018?
Director Belcourt?
It would be, excuse me, thank you, Worship, through the Deputy Mayor Allen. It would be a continuation of signing of various parks and facilities throughout the municipality. As you all know, we're going to have an additional facility in Midhurst this year, which we would sign, which would be the pavilion. Bishop Park, if we get the splash pad at Homer Barrett, it would be another one that we would sign. So we would get, out of the 37.5, we would be able to fund, I believe, about 8 signs. And we typically look at all the facilities throughout the municipality and make the rec advisory committee and then make recommendations as to which ones should be signed based on use or location, etc.
CEO Brindley?
Thank you, Mayor, and to Council. I would propose, hopefully, that we can keep the allocation at 37.5, and what we can do as staff is come back to Council first thing in the new year, talk about the electronic signs, and actually define a program very early in the year, and then see if there is the option to maybe do a hybrid, or at least start on a plan to look at electronic and try to still complete the signs that we're still trying to do from the standpoint of continuity. So I propose that the allocation still be there, and we'll come back with a staff report on what we'll do for 2018.
No, and I think that is a good approach. You leave the number in, and it could be a combination of some new signs and then some electronic and whatever we decide as a council. Councillor Hanna?
Thank you, and further to that, I would hope or request that some communication be made with the entities before the signs are put up. For example, I know in the report it suggested a sign at the library in Midhurst. I would suggest that the sign that's currently there is conducive to the community, and it sort of fits in with the building and the atmosphere. To put one of those blue and white highway type signs in front of it, I think would take away from the ambiance, if you like, of the library. So I would think that some dialogue with the residents or the library, at least before the sign was put there, would be appropriate. And the other thing too, at our last Midhurst Hall Board meeting, there was lady come forward offering a opportunity for a donated electronic sign, and we're waiting for information on that. So before a sign was generated on behalf of taxpayers put there, we should wait and see whether we get that sign donated or not. And if it does come forward, I will share it with our township staff, and they can make a determination whether they want it or not.
Thank you. Any comment, Director Belcour, or I'll just go to Councillor Coghlan. Councillor Coghlan.
Thank you, Mayor French. And council, remember last year we had a lengthy discussion about signage and electronic signage. Staff already has direction. Last year, a resolution was carried that read that council directs staff to prepare a report regarding electronic signage program for all the settlement areas in the township, and that the project cost for the signage be considered in the 6-year capital plan. So that direction's already been given. I think that the portion to come back, if we can have it included, the cost sharing, because there are multiple hall boards that are looking into contributing towards a signage program or putting a sign up themselves. And the discussion we had last time was the control of that, whether it was going to be controlled by the municipality. So if a hall board's paying for it and expects control of it, that's the issue there. So the program that comes forward in that report, if it could outline how it would like to be operated, how they would be operated, and who they would be operated by.
Okay, good point. Thank you. Any other questions on any item on the Parks and Rec? Okay, so those will remain in the budget as listed. We're not shifting anything around. Now, I guess we'll get an updated one with the splash pad in it. So all those numbers will be tabulated because they're coming from DCs, but just for our record. Okay. Councillor Coghlan.
Thank you, Mayor French. Do you, or through you to Director Schmidt, do you want the recreation resolutions now, as we don't know exactly what time we're ending at? There's 3 resolutions, or 2 resolutions stemming from this conversation, and then I'm going to be asking council to reconsider a motion that was defeated at our last session.
Would you like, do you want a motion to have the splash pad included? Do you need that?
We have that.
Okay, you have that. Okay, Councillor Coghlan.
Thank you, Mayor French. It was the operational expenses that were defeated that I would like to have reconsidered and put in. We also need a motion to have the tree nursery exit incorporated with the tree nursery project, and also that project 2017-37 Parvala Road be included in the 6-year capital plan. So there's 2 more additional. From what I heard at council at the table here, it needs to be a resolution directed to staff.
Okay. Sure.
Right. So I'll start with the first one then. It would be that the capital project 2018-41 tree nursery exit be incorporated with capital project 2018-21 tree nursery ball diamond expansion for a total of $525,000 funded from the same model. So DC. Or funded, do you want me to put DC in there? Okay.
Mayor French, could I ask for that total to be repeated? I didn't quite catch it.
It basically, it's the 2 items,
So-
if you, at the, yeah, 21 and 41.
So 525,000, is that what you
Yes.
said? Okay. Yeah.
Yes, can I have a seconder for Deputy Mayor Allen? And just a clarification, because I know there was, because this is the operating costs. You're talking about for the splash pad?
Sorry, Mayor French, this is incorporating the exit
Oh,
for
sorry,
Trinity
okay.
Street Park
Let's deal with
into
that
the
one first.
project to
Yeah,
allow for
yes.
DC funding.
Okay. Jumping ahead. Well, I think we know what the resolution reads, and we'll wait to be printed out, and so we're effectively just combining the two into one project, however it's going to show up in the future one. So all those in favor? Carried. And Councillor Coghlan, you have another motion?
The second one would be that that council reconsider, there's no resolution number attached to it, but the operational expenses associated with this North Service Area splash pad for $15,000 in 2018.
And I just wanted to check on that one for clarification. I know it may not enjoy the entire operating season, and this is a question to Director Belcourt, but since the time period a splash pad is operated, would it use a lot of what would be the normal operating costs, just to ensure that we put the right number in the operating side of the budget? Director Belcourt?
Thank you, Your Worship. At this time, it would be difficult to say without having a construction schedule or knowing how committed, suppliers are as to when the system could be built. Realistically, I would say 15,000 for half the operating season, I think would be sufficient, or more. Yeah, I would say that'd be sufficient because I don't believe we would get much more than half an operating season.
Good. Thank you for that clarification. Oh, Councillor Anna.
Yeah, I just have a question. Is the assumption being made that it's going to be a recirculated, chlorinated system or flow-through?
Director Belcourt?
Based on the operating costs that we've projected at 15,000, that would be a recirculated system with disinfection.
Yeah, need a seconder for the reconsideration first? Councillor Austin? Okay, all those in favor of reconsidering, I guess, carried, or opposed, but carried. And now we'll have the actual motion. Actually, just a procedural matter. Did the resolution get, actually, the original one get actually tabled? It did, and then defeated. Okay, good. So it was a reconsideration. Thank you. So I have a mover, and do I have it? I need a seconder for Councilor Larson. Okay, that's what we have, is the mover and seconder for the addition of the 15,000. No, we had to do the reconsideration first before we actually do the motion. Okay, so Councilor Austin?
I'm seconding the motion to add the $15,000 to the operating budget.
Good. So moved by Coghlan, seconded by Austin. That the motion regarding the addition of, oh, okay. I have to wait till it's printed out. Okay, so also moved by Coghlan and seconded by Austin, that $15,000 for the operation of a splash pad in Elmva be included in the 2018. Should we say operating budget, or does it matter, Director Schmidt?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, operating budget would probably be applicable.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, and Councillor McConkey, I think you have a resolution.
My resolution is to add 2017-37, and I think we should call it PAR funding instead of, or PAR recreation, to be included into the capital budget. In 2018, or, yeah. I will follow up with the residents on that, and, yeah, I'd like to get that done before I leave.
Yeah, and of course, the clarification is that it is no tax impact. It is coming from an existing reserve, just so everybody knows. Oh, yes, can we have a second for that? Councillor Coghlan. Discussion?
Just
Councillor
clarification, how much are we talking? I know it's reserved, but how much is it?
It's 10,000, and it was actually given from the development
Yeah, okay.
community with
Right.
faith in us that we were going
And
to deliver.
it's trail development, is it?
No, it was a trail development, but what happened was, we were actually going to start it last year. But the trail that was to take them from our Par Boulevard, which is down Sunnydale Road, over to the Grenfell, to the Grenfell Hall. Well, now, if you've seen all the construction done from the Simcoe County that takes you out of Orchard Road, I would call it Orchard Road, it's Pine Grove Road, it's a busy road now. There's no way
So-
I'd be taking them to
Right.
an
So what
unsafe
is the
zone.
change?
So now the change is, well, it's not in, it's always been in our budget. Like last year, it was in our budget. It keeps getting carried forward and not completed. I want it completed next year, and I wanted it put in the capital plan.
Okay, right.
Okay, yeah, and just for, in some ways, it's like a mini Elmville Hydro Fund, specifically dedicated to that area. They thought they wanted to join their trail, but the reconstruction of Highway 90 bypass, and there's no lights there, there's no possibility of doing a trail that would be safe to cross. And the residents have decided that they'd like to use it for something else, and they have not identified what that project is. But we just want to make sure that it shows up. You know, if for some reason it doesn't get done or they don't come together, at least it continues to stay in there, doesn't fall off the radar, because I know we've had a lot of conversations on it over the years because we keep forgetting about it. So this way it'll remain an item that won't get forgotten. So, moved by McConkey, second by Coghlan, that capital project 2017-37, Power Recreation be included in the 2018 capital budget. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Any items in the Parks and Rec that we'd like to speak to? Director Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, sorry. If there's no more questions with Parks and Rec, instead of moving to fleet and equipment, I would ask that we move into information technology just to deal with that quickly, and then we can move into fleet and equipment, if that would be okay.
I'm sure that would be fine with council. Yep. So no other questions, just on the, except for the Elmville Arena. centrally placed chiller, and that wasn't brought up anyway, so we'll move into information technology. It was on the same page. Okay, back to you, Michael. Are you going to present it, or CEO Brindley? Oh, sorry. Director Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The idea was just to, we have our IT coordinator here, and we just wanted to try to go through the IT. If there was any questions of members of council, he's present, and then it would free him up for the rest of the day to deal with some other matters. So I know the building department software, our chief building official spoke to that the other evening. And I believe our IT coordinator has previously spoken about the server replacement, so he's available for any questions that council may have. We weren't necessarily going to present unless council wishes us to do so.
Okay, I'll open the question, Deputy Mayor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor French. Please remind me, Director Schmidt or anybody, the building department software, it's been deferred a couple of times, I believe. Is it planned to actually be spent in 2018?
Director Schmidt?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Deputy Mayor Allen, I believe that's the case. I believe they've been looking at a couple of different solutions and also working with the existing vendor. And I think the idea is that they're at a point now where I believe they want to look at acquiring some new software in the new year.
Councilor McConkey?
When you sometimes get some new software for a department, you might have some migration. I just wondered if there's any migration involved, or it's all going to start from net new, because I just wanted to see staffing, because I know they're going to be very busy like they were issuing building permits before. So to do any migration activity, I just don't know if we would need some contract student or any associated, some people to assist with that.
Michael?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor McConkey, absolutely. Migrating data is a critical component to changing software. Typically, it comes with a cost, but it is a pretty mandatory thing to do, and that's not something we're going to leave by the wayside. At the very least, we can always keep the old software for legacy records, but our intent is to move forward and bring the new building permits onto the new software as well.
CEO Brindley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through to Councilor McConkey. It's always our costing that when we cost these out, it includes migration costs. So what you see here is the cost of not only the software, but also the cost related to migration.
Follow-up, Councilor McConkey?
In my years of working in IT, migration activities would not be included into the software costs. It wouldn't be capital. So I just can't understand that.
Director Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councilor McConkey, and just further to the CAO's comments, typically what we've done, and we've done it with our financial software, is as the CAO Brindley mentioned, the total dollar amount that you see here is not just to acquire the software, but it's also for the implementation, which also includes migration costs and training costs as well. So it's not just software we're buying, it's the full package that's included. So hopefully that addresses your question. But it typically, that's how we price it, is we look for all of those things and not price it separately.
Councilor McConkey?
I understand that, but usually migration is done by internal, because we're the ones who own the data. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I know we went for the smart meters and we went for some other stuff, and we're still sitting there with data that's maybe not there. So when I implement a project and put this type of funding into it, I want to make sure, I don't like the approach where, well, we can still have the old one. That doesn't enhance the way you do your business. That actually puts a higher cost to the way you do business. So I would like to ensure that the migration activities, that we do have the staffing associated to do the migration activities, and whether it be that we have to put in for a contract student or something, I think that we need to look at that.
Any comments? CEO Brindley, Director Schmidt? Okay. Anyway, I think comment noted. Michael?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor McConkey, absolutely. When we initially went out for information, all of the quotes we received included migration costs, which would be carried out by the vendor. So that our intent is to absolutely bring on the old building permits and other data as well.
Okay, and did I see another question to my right here? Councillor Ritchie?
Regarding the, is there a yearly cost to maintain this new software that we're going to be incurring every year? If there is, what is that?
Director Schmidt?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Ritchie. Right now, I believe there's an annual fee of roughly $8,000 to $10,000 for the current system. Until we go out and determine what the new system is, I don't know what that cost will be. It might be a little bit more than the 8,000 to 10,000, or it could be in the same range. But we would report back on that when we tender the project.
Councillor McConkey?
One last thing, but to consider into the future years, we're getting a lot more technical, and we're driving some stuff from the front end to get efficiencies. But with our website, I just think that it needs redone, totally redone, so that it basically talks to a back end and to the other systems that we're thinking of going for in the future. And I think maybe going into next year, as you know, not this year's budget or anything, but when you think about next year, especially with our growth, you might want to start thinking of how you're going to evolve the township website, the way we do business, and talking to the back end.
Is there any comment on electronic this CO billing?
Thank you, Mayor. Through to Councilor McConkey, you've got some great points. Our challenges, our IT vendors aren't very cooperative. Most of our systems are, like example, Dynamics, Great Plains, and then looking at this system here, we'll have to look at some integration, but the challenge is most of the vendors who have municipal information don't play well with other companies, and that's one of our biggest challenges. And we're too small to go to an SAP or go to a large enterprise system, that example Bell or a big company. So we try to look at these things, but here's an example, we're trying to release our virtual city hall. And even doing that small project, well, maybe it's not small, but we're having a big challenge with Dynamics, even trying to talk to Moneris and trying to get online payments integrated within that portal, which would be on our website. So I see your comments, and we're going to try to do that, but unfortunately, it's a great idea, but it's not as simple as it is because these companies tend not to play well.
Any other questions on IT, info technology? Okay, good. Thank you. So, Director Schmidt, where would you like us to go next?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you wanted to, if council wanted to jump back up to the fleet and equipment, and we can start there and kind of cover off the rest of the sections of the capital.
Okay, so, yeah, fleet and equipment, we have Public Works, Parks and Rec, and Fire, and everybody's here. So, do we want to kind of look at Public Works first, and we'll just do them in blocks? And is there any questions of council? That was actually page 1 of the 2 of your 2018 budget. Sorry? Yeah, it's just page 1 on mine. So,
I hit this.
okay, we all good? And we're focused on the 2018, and of course, it's on page 1 there, and fleet and equipment, if we go into the other, that's the 6-year capital, then it'll show up starting on page 2. But right now, we're trying to focus on 2018. So do we have questions on Public Works fleet and equipment? Councillor Hanna.
Thank you, Mayor French. The sidewalk plow, that's a vehicle that's used for cutting grass in the summertime. We're not just buying it for plowing the sidewalk, correct?
Director Belcour or Director Coleman?
Thank you, Mayor French. Through you to Councillor Hanna. Are you referring to the one that was purchased in 2017 or the one proposed for 2023?
Okay, I might have jumped ahead. I thought it was 2018.
Yeah, no, Councillor Hanna, we have the two groups. The easiest one to follow is the 2018 budget draft. In Public Works, there's replace wheel excavator, fuel management system, and tandem 18.
I just got a year ahead of you. Thank you.
No problem. So any other questions on the Public Works fleet? I'll go to Councillor Ritchie first.
Thank you, Mayor French. In regarding the wheel excavator, I have a couple questions. What's the current hours on that right at the moment?
Director Coleman?
Thank you, Mayor French. Through to you to Councillor Ritchie. There's over 10,000 hours on the current wheeled excavator.
And in your pricing, does that also include a cutting more attachment for cutting back the brush and what have you?
Director Coleman?
Thank you, Mayor French. Through you to Councillor Ritchie. That's correct. We would go out with a tender to attach to our current attachments and include a brushing head with the new one.
I know other, Mayor French, I've watched other municipalities up in Tiny Township, they have one, and that's it there. And other municipalities have got it, and, you know, from talking to other people and some of our staff, that by cutting back the brush, it gets the sunlight down onto the road, it dries the road out, and gives us better roads. So I find this money well spent. And this is a machine that's can do both. It can cut brush, it can dig ditches, and we've been very aggressive right back from our my first term in getting ditches dug and getting the water flowing. And so this can do both, and then we're in a big municipality, so we can use this year-round. So I think this is money well spent.
Thank you for those comments. Any other questions in this, Deputy Mayor Allen?
Thank you, Mayor French. So this was deferred again. It would be expected to be actually purchased in 2018?
Director Coleman?
Thank you, Mayor French. Yeah, it was not approved to be replaced in 2017. It was deferred to 2018. So yes, we would go out for tender as soon as possible.
Any other questions on the Public Works equipment? Okay, let's go to Parks and Recreation. Questions on any of the items there? Replace zero turn, replace half ton, single axle groomer trailer, and another half ton. Oh, Councillor Ritchie.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor French. The trailer, is that the one, are we replacing that with the one that got stolen? Did we ever get the one back? Through to Director of Parks and Rec.
Director Belcour.
Thank you, Worship, through to Councillor Ritchie. The one that was stolen a few years ago has already been replaced. Yes. This is a trailer that we use to transport the ball diamond groomer around. It is a 1990 trailer. We do experience a lot of issues with it, and we want to just upgrade to a longer landscape trailer that's more that we can use for more than just the ball diamond groomer.
Deputy Mayor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor French. Just wondering about the two of them are coming from tax supported and two of them from reserves, and yet they all refer to replacements. Can you just clarify the difference in the source of funding, please?
Director Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Deputy Mayor Allen. The zero-turn mower and the half-ton from 2005 are both suggested to come from reserves, whereas the other two replacements are, as noted, are coming from are suggested to come from tax. Essentially, no real justification in that regards. It's just simply we're looking at trying to reduce the amount coming from taxation, if you will. And so we do have funds set aside in the reserve for some of these pieces of equipment, but not necessarily for every piece of equipment. So we're trying to balance, if you will, how much we're actually drawing on reserves versus how much money is coming from taxation. We're also trying to make sure that the level of taxation funding coming out of the supporting the capital budget remains fairly smooth over the next number of years, as opposed to having big dips and or spikes in that funding model.
Can we just follow on, please? Can we just take a look at the reserves then and see which specific reserves those two items would come out of and what balance is left after that?
Director Schmidt?
Is that the recreation facility?
Sorry, I'm just trying to get there. Give me 1 sec, please. So, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Deputy Mayor Allen, both are proposed to come from the Recreation Equipment Reserve.
Recreation Equipment Reserve, which starts at 210,000 at the end of the year, and then 58,000, 59,000 almost coming out of it to be a net of 151,000.
Correct.
Okay. Other questions on Parks and Rec equipment? Okay. Seeing none, move on to fire and open the floor to questions. Councillor Hanna.
Thank you, Mayor French. I followed the report that goes along with the request for the 3 trucks for fire. 2 of them are replacement, one's a new. We put a lot of money into fire this year, and I know fire do a great job, but we're renovating the works department yard 1. We're doing the kitchen. We're doing more funding for staff hours. We got 3 new trucks here. I would suggest that if it was possible to defer the net new truck for 1 year, it would take some impact off of the money we're spending on our fire services. And I realize they wouldn't be asking for it if there wasn't some need, I guess. But I think we've got along with only the sharing of the fire between the fire prevention and the training officer. And if we could do that for 1 more year, it would reduce the amount of money we are spending, and I've heard comments about it seems to be an excessive amount of money being spent on our fire service in 2018, and I'm just sharing that.
Director, give for the additional new pickup. Do you want to comment on that, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through my colleague, Mr. Chen, I do have a little presentation. If it is okay with Council, I can speak to the reasons why. And obviously Council will make up its mind as to whether it agrees with Councillor Hanna or if it wishes to proceed. And if it would also be okay if we could hold the questions to the end. I believe it's only about 4 or 5 slides.
Carry on.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not sure who controls the page advance, but if you could go forward another 3, I think it is where we start. 1 more. Make that 2. Go. Perfect. We get there in the end. That's what happens when I don't have the screen in front of me, I'm afraid. Okay, so if we advance to the next slide, please. The Fire Prevention Officer basically requires a vehicle for fire inspections, investigations, public education, health and safety inspections, and emergency responses on duty. The fire training officer also requires the use of vehicle for providing or attending off-site training at fire stations, base Borden, Ontario Fire College, Township Office, where he runs health and safety, WMIS, driver training, to name but a few, and also emergency responses on duty. Next slide, please. The need is driven by growth, basically in the number of day staff in recent years. We're up to 4. Community development, as we expand areas like Stone Manor Woods, which comes with issues. The developer's pretty good, but we do have roads being blocked, and we need to make sure that construction safety plans are being adhered to, and that would be one of the duties of the fire prevention officer. And suppression force size now averages 100, so it's not intended that this vehicle, if it were purchased, would be going home with either of these two gentlemen under normal circumstances at the end of the day. But we're particularly squeezed for transportation room for providing training off-site. So that's also another aggravating factor. And the next slide, please. These two officers work day shifts and evenings as required, sometimes also night times when we actually have structure fires. The current practice is both personnel use an SUV currently assigned to Station 3. Fire response personnel, rather than obtain a vehicle historically, it made sense when I typed it yesterday, but basically they use this truck, which takes away from the station transportation at Station 3. It's been a reasonable workaround, but it's just not working for us efficiently anymore. Recent case in point, I needed to go a couple of other places. Somebody already had the truck that I usually drive when I'm in town, and couldn't actually go anywhere. So there is a bit of a pinch that we're feeling with this. And the next slide, please. When one of these personnel take the SUV, it often does not leave a personnel transport vehicle for Station 3, nor towing vehicle for the RTV, training trailer, command trailer, impacting emergency response capability, as the chief and deputy are frequently out of quarters working or responding in other locations, and usually separately. We're usually off doing other things. And the next slide, please. Though a business case could be made for 2 vehicles, and I certainly understand the comments of Councillor Hanna, there is a lot going on in fire. The chief and deputy can only reasonably recommend 1 vehicle be acquired to be shared between the 2 individuals, because they can still use mine or the deputies as required, and available at Station 3 for other crews when not in use, so evenings, training, that kind of thing. It would also allow for a far more proactive approach to fire prevention in growth areas, ensuring construction fire safety in new neighbourhoods during construction. And the next slide, please. Proposed vehicle will also enable us to fill light fleet vehicle repair gaps when one of the existing light vehicles is out for repair. It's not unusual for us to lose 1 or 2 at a time for maintenance, and that means that we don't have a vehicle to put in its place currently. Proposed pickup would also tow the training trailer, RTV trailer, command trailer as required. And I believe the next slide is for questions.
Okay, Councillor Hanna.
Thank you, and I appreciate all that, sir, but I was just suggesting that if we could keep the 2007 vehicle for the services you pointed out, and because we don't get a lot for the trade-in on the fire vehicles, we could keep, instead of trading it in, use it for your instead of the net new, use it in place of the net new. That would eliminate buying 3 new vehicles. We'd only be buying 2 in this budget.
Do you want to respond, Chief Cavey?
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Hanna has a good point. It's certainly an alternative we could explore if that's the will of Council.
Before I go to Councillor Coghlan, how many kilometres are on the 2007?
286,000 hard kilometres.
Councillor Coghlan.
Thank you, Mayor French, and through you to Chief Gavay. The last presentation was, you were outlining the benefits of a passenger vehicle. Can you just explain to me why the choice is to go with the pickup truck over the Expedition that was purchased last time?
Chief Cavey.
Thank you, Your Worship. Basically, the trouble with SUVs is they don't really carry a lot of equipment. What we like to have is the ability to slide, when a vehicle goes out for unexpected reasons, we like to have the ability to put other vehicles in their place. They can tow, they're not great. If we were to replace the SUV, we'd replace it with a 3/4 ton pickup. Carries a lot more in the box. It keeps the carcinogen-filled turnout gear and other equipment separate to the firefighters, and therefore reduces our exposure for a cancer claim through WSIB. The passenger compartment, I guess, of a large pickup truck will probably hold 5 firefighters, whereas the SUV really carries about 4, depending on the size of the individuals that are going inside of it. It's just a far more practical vehicle, a pickup truck versus a SUV.
CEO Brindley?
Thank you, and through the mayor to Councillor Colgan. One of the things I notice as well is not just from the standpoint the vehicles carry more, so we should have all pickups, but it's also maybe a philosophy of the firefighting that's done by our chief, whereas the previous chief, in an incident command position, probably wouldn't don equipment. Our fire chief now gets in dirty with the guys. So to have that equipment there and have that vehicle available, I'm also personally seeing a difference in the way we're deploying, in this case, Chief Gavay will not hesitate to don equipment and get involved with an incident.
Any other questions? Councilman Conkey?
When we speak about the need of the vehicle for the fire prevention, the two positions, I can see the point. What I don't see, and again, it comes down to communication and maybe an enhancement on the report. Fire prevention, it becomes very strong through Fire Prevention Month and that, and I do follow, on Twitter, and that I see what they're doing in the community. But when you talk about new development, to be able to go out to the new development, share building, I think a lot of the fire prevention actually needs to be done in the older buildings. But anyways, I guess having our report, all I see monthly is the incidents in fire and how many, volunteers have come out. I think we need to have a better communication, understanding what our fire prevention officers are doing in new build-outs and stuff like that, because I wouldn't have thought that they were going to be involved going out to help with the inspection or that with the new buildings and that. So it's sort of nice to see some of the incidents or that being tracked per the month that the fire prevention is doing. So maybe just additional reporting in that.
Chief Gavay, maybe you can clarify, the impact of new developments on fire prevention, because maybe we're misunderstanding it. And then I'll go to CEO Brindley if he wants to comment.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Council. So currently you do have a monthly report which shows how many inspections or public education sessions are done, but it doesn't really provide a lot of high-level detail, so that is something we could look at changing. The Ontario Fire Code does actually require us to be out in new construction and demolitions to make sure that they have a fire safety plan in progress, that they're not storing building materials out on the road. And I know my colleague, Director Coleman, can relate to a large development where we had to pay them a visit. Typically, these are duties that are required but have not been done by Springwater. And, in the sort of year that I've been here, I've been looking at, let's not make any unnecessary changes, but let's enhance what we have, what the taxpayers are already paying for, to make sure all employees are performing productively. And our fire prevention officer does do a great job, but we do need to expand our program in 2018. And we've been working with him to have a well-rounded, robust fire prevention plan, so that he's not only doing what he does now, which is, enforcement and inspection activities on existing construction, whether it's older or relatively new, but we're going out to the new builds and the demolitions and making sure everybody's doing those things that they're required to do in accordance with the Ontario Fire Code.
Councillor Coughlin? Or sorry, CEO Brindley first, and then I think you had a question? Okay, you don't now.
Thank you, Mayor French. Just to add we can add some more, because it's not just on the template, but the annual review also has a section on fire prevention, and it does go into how many homes we visit, how many commercial occupancies. So we can always look at better ways of reporting. We've heard that from council, and we can get better and better at that job too.
Councillor Austin?
Thank you, Mayor French. Through you to Director Schmidt. It says that the new pickup fire prevention and training officers is DC eligible, but when I look over under the column, it says DC Reserve Fund, that figure is not in there, and I'm just wondering why.
Director Schmidt?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Austin. So I'll bring to your attention the Reserve and Reserve Fund projection statement that we provided members of council. And if you look on the second page, under the fire development charge reserve fund specifically, we're projecting about a balance of around $48,000 remaining in that specific fund. And so similarly on some of the other projects, we don't have all the funds set aside for that particular project, and so we are requesting or suggesting that the money would come from fire reserve, and then we would pay back the fire reserve from the DC as we collect the DCs.
Councillor Hanna?
Thank you, and thank you, Chief, for the explanation. And just to muddy the waters a little bit further, we've approved funding, I believe, for a second bylaw person. Will that bylaw person require a vehicle, and if so, could we use the fire chief's vehicle for that?
Director Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to clarify, the bylaw officer has yet to be approved. That is something that council needs to still consider. There's been discussion, but the program changes, there's only 2 program changes where we've had resolutions. The rest of them need separate resolutions. So just to clarify, that it's yet to be approved.
CEO Brindley?
Thank you, Mayor, through to Councillor Hand as well. It's our intent, as mentioned, that person work off hours different than our current officer. So it's our hope at this time that a new vehicle is not needed, and that essentially one employee will work during the day and the other one picks up an afternoon shift.
Any other questions on the fleet and equipment? Okay. So, Director Schmidt, where would you like to go now?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If we can jump into roads and related infrastructure, that would be appreciated.
Okay. So if you have a quick look at the list for 2018, if you want to pose some questions, now is the time to do it with Director Coleman here. Deputy Mayor Allen.
It's around the same sort of question as posed earlier, is the logic of taking from reserves versus debt versus tax supported. Is it just to get balance and not be taking too much from reserve? Maybe you just touch on that, please.
Director Schmidt.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Deputy Mayor Allen. In some cases, some of the projects you see are debt funded. Again, trying to balance what the overall increase is on the taxation side of things. So it is a bit of a balancing act in that regards. Obviously, the urban rural or the urban road reconstruction, we do have some projects that could be DC eligible, but again, if you look at our DC reserve fund for roads, we have we're in a bit of a the figures, the numbers aren't there, and so we are suggesting that we would debt finance those in order to do that project or those projects, and then we would again repay from the DCs as we collect them. So in particular, the Albert Street road project is one of those ones that we would essentially, it's DC eligible, but we don't have enough DCs, so we would it is a priority, and essentially in order to get that project done, we would have to borrow some DCs or some debt and then repay through DCs. And then we have other funding mechanisms, again, gas tax. We try to, again, it's a bit of a balancing act as to where gas tax goes and where we feel where the need is, and we fund accordingly.
Just follow on if I may, please. We had 2 projects moved to 218 from 217. That's presumably because I can't recall the specifics, but we didn't feel we could afford to spend on those last year, but we're planning to spend on those hopefully in 218. Are there any such projects that could potentially be moved to lighten the burden on debt or taxation from 218 to 219?
See, I go to Director Coleman. I'm sure you've analyzed this list, and is there anything that could be considered, shifted?
Thank you, Mayor French. Through you to members of council, there's a fair amount of shifting that was done this year to marry the requirements of the six-year capital that were created from the road needs study in 2005 and to bring in the components of the 2017 road needs study that were done. In terms of a recommendation as to what to remove, I think it would be at the will of council to review the projects and make your recommendation that way.
Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you, Mayor French, and through to you to Director Coleman. Is it a correct assumption when I see project number 201809 and then it's deferred to 19, that indicates that staff has already taken projects from 2018 and deferred them in order to create what we're seeing here today?
Director Coleman?
Thank you, Mayor French. That is correct. Ones that, so you're referring to Nursery Road? The 2018-09 is Nursery Road. It was deferred to 2019. When we reviewed all the projects that were recommended for 2018, it was significant. So in order to marry the needs from the previous six-year capital budget, add requirements from this year's road needs study, and to have a fair budget, the operations coordinator reviewed each of the roads and sort of prioritized them as what should be done this year and what can be put back.
Director Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one further comment to the Deputy Mayor's comments. Again, one thing that we try to do with each capital budget is we try to make sure that the amount that's being supported out of the operating budget is smooth. And so I would just caution members of the council that if you're looking to make some major changes in the capital and reduce the taxation supported projects, that's obviously up to council, but it would mean that the amount that's funded out of taxation, out of the operating budget to support capital, you're likely going to see a major increase next year, because if you look at the six-year capital plan and the funding sources at the end of that six-year capital plan spreadsheet, you can see that that level is already starting to increase. And so it would just provide for a larger impact potentially in 2018 or 2019 and beyond. Again, I just somewhat caution you on that, that's all.
No, I think that is a worthy note, because we know certain municipalities get themselves into trouble when they push it out, because sooner or later you have to increase your taxes dramatically to do a catch-up. But there was a comment that Director Coleman made, and I think maybe if you want to provide a quick overview when you looked at it, and balancing out the budget and considerations and projects, what kind of movement did you make on the lists that may have been originally planned for 2018?
Thank you, Mayor French. Through you to members of council. Nursery Road was pushed back to 2019. Golf Course Road was pushed back to 2022. Usher Road was in the budget for this year is pushed back to 2020. And then if you want me to go on, some of the 2019 projects were also to push further out.
Okay. No, I just want to make the point that, that there was quite a review to kind of spread it out again to keep on track, and yet, I guess at the same time avoid roads falling apart, because it's a lot more expensive to build a new road than repair one before its life's end. Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you, Mayor French, and through you to Director Coleman. As a follow-up to our discussion about Alexander Street, has there been any movement on what that is going to require and whether that would impede with the development that's happening there?
Director Coleman?
Thank you, Mayor French. Through you to Councillor Coghlan. So the current condition of Alexander Street was rated poor. 40 out of 100 was the pavement condition rating. That development, the Marshall lands, is at least 2 years off and dependent on the water. In addition to that, you're familiar with the area, so the most recent extension of Gibb Street, that construction traffic used the existing Gibb Street, and it did not break up the road or damage the road or anything. And then if I could point to Dobson Road, which was in very poor condition, we didn't upgrade it prior to the construction, It fell apart significantly, and our staff spend a significant amount of time out there filling potholes and grading the road and whatnot. I know we received a number of calls about it. I know the ward councillor received a number of calls. Mayor French received a number of calls. I feel that by upgrading this Alexander Street, there's 13 lots in there. It would hold up like Gibb Street did, and it would prevent us from receiving those calls.
Councillor McConkey?
Couple questions. St. Patrick's subdivision, you know that's been a sore spot with me, but I know that there was a second phase, and when I see it in 2018, 770, we do have to complete it. But when I see it carrying into 2019 and 2020, I have concerns. So I need to understand, because I thought that we were going to complete one this year and then the next year. So what have we completed? I know that we've completed half the subdivision. I know that there was not only road work, but they were doing redesign. So I need to understand a bit more about that subdivision.
Could you provide an overview?
Thank you, Mayor French. Through you to Councillor McConkey. As you recall, with the first phase of St. Patrick's Drive, the storm sewer and the base repairs were completed the first year. Because of the high water table, we left it and let the winter set in, see how things would hold up. And then the following year, it was paved and the sidewalks completed. It's a similar situation for the second phase. Next, 2018, we propose to do the storm sewer, the base repairs, and bring it up to base asphalt, leave it for the winter, and then in 2019, there would be any base repairs that are required due to the high water table, and then there would be the top course asphalt, the final curbs and raising of the manholes. And then the money in 2020 that I'm showing would just be the release of the holdback that we keep on the contractor to ensure their works are satisfactory.
Follow up?
So with the basins and stuff, are the sidewalks in, half the sidewalks in right now? Is my question.
Director Coleman?
Thank you, Mayor French, through you to Councillor McConkey. Yes, the sidewalks for the first phase of that subdivision, so from on St. Patrick's Drive from Phelpston Road to Shannon Street are complete.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I do have a question on the 6-year capital plan. I have concerns on the growth related. Just had it. Okay, so the growth related, I'm glad to see that Craig Road is in there. Not sure how much work will really get done. The other one is the Dobson Road, north of Sunnydale. And it's not till 2021. I believe that work could maybe be moved up. We're getting a lot of complaints there, and we just asked the developer to surface going into the subdivision onto Dobson Road, and to complete that work, to take it right to the end. I think that would appease the neighbors a lot. Like, they've gone through a lot in that area with the development, the dust, everything. So if there was any way that could be moved up, I think you would be giving something to the residents in that area who have given up their lives with a lot of dust. And to see, it's not a huge piece of road. It's not asking for sidewalks. We pressed the developer to pave part of it because of the complaints and the way the road goes and the grinding down. And because of the development, it does take people to lead down that road. And I would just like to see it moved up to 2019.
I'll go to Director Coleman, but I've driven there a few times now, and since that section has been replaced, which was a majority of the problems, it kept breaking up, and if it holds up, I assume there's still a fair amount of traffic that's going to go in there before its completion. But Director Coleman, do you want to comment, moving it up?
Thank you, Mayor French. We could certainly explore that, and I would be open to that should council wish to do that. That's not a problem.
So actually, I'll go back to Councillor McConkey. So would you obviously like to move it into 2019 or somewhere like that? And, yeah, okay. Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you, Mayor French. If you look at the line item, it actually is identified as 2020-11 with no deferral in brackets. So I'm just curious if it is actually a project from 2020 in the 2021 column, and if so, if that would satisfy Councillor McConkey. If you look at the line item, Dobson Road, it's 2020-11, which indicates the year, but it's slated in 2021. So I'm just curious if maybe that was pushed, if it was pushed intentionally, or because usually when it's deferred intentionally, there's bolded brackets that say deferred to the next year.
Yeah, maybe if you have a look at that, Director Coleman, yeah, and part of our shuffling around, and we do move things from one year to the other, was that move for a particular reason, or was it put in the wrong column, or did we purposely move it?
Thank you, Mayor French. I don't know, actually. You're right. Typically, if we do defer it, there is a note to say that's deferred. I don't recall, to be honest with you.
Councillor McConkey?
If there's no issue in what, like if there's no impact to you doing it in 2019 to the existing and everything, I just feel that yeah, it's nice what the developers did for the new users, but I think it's something that we owe to our existing users for all of the disruption that has been caused. So if it doesn't cause a disruption to your work and it's not going to make it that you have to redo it again or something, I would really like to see this moved up to 2019 because of what we've caused in that area.
Director Schmidt, you were going to comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just the comments made by Councillor Coghlan. So in the 2017 capital budget or 6-year capital plan that was discussed in 2017, the project was slated for 2020. And I guess when we did the 2018 and 6-year capital, it looks like an oversight on our side in not putting a comment there that it was deferred to 2021. But the 2020 comes from the 2017 discussions that we had. So it was 2020 originally and was pushed to 2021.
What would be the impact if it, for some reason, was shifted to 19?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to members of council, in the 2018 budget, I believe we're suggesting that it would be debt financed at this stage. So if you move it into 2019, essentially it would mean another approximately $176,000 in debt financing that would be required. With that said, when we go to rejig or we look at the 2019, we always tend to look at the projects, and to the extent that some of the projects, other things may are a higher priority, we can discuss it then, but essentially right now it would be debt financed, so that would be the impact.
Actually, I didn't look at the line item, but Dobson Road, even the rebuilding of that, would it not have been all part of, because DCs are just a portion of it? Because it's obviously the entrance to the new development.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to members of council, that is something that we can definitely look into as we're exploring our update to our DC. As far as I know, again, I would have to double check that, but I believe it was only a certain portion of Dobson that was actually DC applicable, not necessarily the whole portion. Beyond the development, I believe, and stand to be corrected, I believe it doesn't extend. It extends to a certain distance, but doesn't lead into other development or other growth-related activities. So, again, it may be something that we need to take a look at, but that may still be a benefit to the existing community and hence not DC eligible beyond the limit of that development. So again, something we take back and take a look at, but that's probably what the determination was, but I would have to double check.
Actually, I think you should look into it even with, because there was a change, because if you go out there now, the wastewater and that is up towards the end of it. And I know there was a different solution when it was first discussed. And I would have to argue that the road up to the entrance of the water treatment plant should have been DC. Because I know they changed the design. Maybe CEO Brindley, you want to comment on that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two things. Definitely the original proposal that was probably included in the DCs had the sewage, the wastewater plant farther south. But at the same time, we can take this away because this is more of a discussion for the next look at the 6-year capital plan. So we can take these notes away, look at moving Dobson up to 219, but at the same time looking at the DC implications of that, because it's just something we can take away and for our next discussion on the 6-year capital instead of today.
No, and I think that's appropriate. And also, I think we have to recognize that even by their plans, the Stone Manor Woods development is progressing at a faster pace than maybe they thought it might. So, yeah, so there might be some opportunity to move forward. Okay. Any other questions on Councillor McConkey?
I guess I'm just unaware of the Ronald Road east of George Johnson, what that would be for 85% DC eligible, because it's got a high price tag and it's got some debt in that and taxation. I just wanted to know what development and what makes that eligible.
Director Schmidt or Director Coleman?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor McConkey, that specific road, I'm just looking at the DC here, the DC background study. It indicates that the Minising Meadows development would be possibly driving that. The DC portion.
Councillor Coghlan?
Is that plow right, or what is, I'm not familiar, okay, thank you.
Yeah, because that was probably in a DC kind of plan a long time ago when that development was first started, and that's good. I'm glad it was in there. Any other points on roads related? Yeah, I think we'll, yeah. Sorry? What shift?
Shift
Sorry?
But I'd just like to have a resolution to push it into the 2019 capital plan, though.
Okay. Yeah, and then they can come back with the report.
So my motion would be for 2020-11 Dobson Road north of Sunnydale Road to be moved into the 2019 capital plan and to refer to see if it's DC eligible.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Anna? Director Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just on that Dobson Road, so I do have the DC Reserve Fund or background study in front of me here. And I guess the reason why staff did not put it as DC eligible, because unlike some of the other roads that are specifically identified in the DC, it's not currently identified in the current DC. With that said, we are going through an update, and we will bring that forward to our consultants and address it at that time.
Well, I want to make sure it gets put into the DC, so I think we need to leave that part to look at, to review DC eligibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the DC review or something, to review in the new DC review.
Question.
They've done changes.
Question, Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you, Mayor French. Aren't all of the roads going to be part of the DC background study that's going to be taken under?
Director Schmidt?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, typically we take a look at all eligible roads. Obviously, existing roads aren't necessary, well, they could be if they have a growth component to them. But yes, we do take a look at all of them. So whether or not the motion identifies that we look at the DC eligibility, we're going to anyways. It's been identified, so.
Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you, Mayor French, and through you to Director Coleman. Understanding that you just did undertake the roads needs study and a lot of thought went into this. If I support moving this back up to the 2019, which is actually a year earlier than the roads needs study has indicated or that you've indicated first, what impact is that going to have? Is there going to be roads that should be done or that you have identified as to be done that are then going to be pushed around, or is this just going to be an added total to that year?
Director Coleman?
Thank you, Mayor French. Through you to Councillor Coghlan, just looking at what we're proposing for 2019 and 2020, the bottom line in 2019 proposed is about 2.7 million, and 2020 is about 7.4 million. 2021 is about 6.8 million, so moving up 176,000 at this point. We can certainly explore it further in 2019 to see if there are projects that need to be deferred, but just looking at the long range, 2019 is fairly lean compared to 2020 and 2021.
Okay, thank you. So we have the mover, yeah, and seconder, yes.
Moved by McConkey, second by Councillor Hanna, that capital project 2020-11 Dobson Road north of Sunnydale Road be moved to the 2019 and to review possible DC eligibility of the project.
All those in favor? Carried. And thank you, Councillor McConkey, for doing my work. Okay. Nothing else on the roads related for the moment? Okay. Where would you like to go next, Director Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe the two remaining sections are water and wastewater.
Municipal buildings, we did that, sorry, in the last one. So water and wastewater, if you want to lead us into that.
Again, Mr. Mayor, through you to members of council, there are a number of projects being proposed both in water and wastewater. Staff are here to answer any questions that members of council may have regarding any of those specific projects.
Okay. Any questions? I know some of these have come along as throughout the year and discussion, but any questions on water and wastewater? Councillor McConkey.
We're spending a lot of money on the wastewater treatment plant in Elmville, which we need to do. And we know that we have certain developments planned, and hopefully, like now, they'll be able to hook on to this wastewater. I'm sure that that's the goal. But as a result of this, what I'm wondering is, can we look at Elmville now and say that there's any expansion as a result of it? Because I believe with the places to grow and different things, you can look at a service area and expand sort of growth there. So I'd like to see some more potential growth as a result of all of this infrastructure that we're fixing, so that when we're looking at our official plan update, can we look at that? Maybe it's a question to Director Spagno.
Maybe a combination, Director Spagno and Director Coleman. This investment, you know, after this investment, what capacity would it provide us for future development, even if for some reason the settlement area boundary was expanded? Yeah, what would, yeah, what, you know, like this kind of investment for growth, and we know there's some planned subdivisions. So what really is the impact of this investment? How much headroom does it give us for future development? I'm not sure who'd like to answer that.
Thank you, Mayor French. In terms of capacity, the limiting factor right now is the lift station, and that is in the current budget. We're carrying over a bit of money and adding to it in 2018 with the hopes of getting that off the ground, or in the ground, I guess. A lot of the other works proposed for the Elmvale wastewater treatment plant are more or less maintenance required because of the age of the facility. To go back to the capacity question, we have a significant amount of money in the budget next year for the inflow and infiltration project that will identify areas where groundwater is infiltrating into the sewers, where there may be cracks or leaks, where maybe there's someone's sump pump or tile bed or footings are connected to the storm or the sanitary sewer where they shouldn't be. So that in itself should increase capacity. At this point, we don't know how much until the project's complete, or until we get into the sewers and find out how much inflow there really is. In terms of capacity for future settlement, that's dependent on.
Director Spagno?
Thank you, Mayor French. And as it relates to future capacity and how it ties in with growth management, as part of the growth management process that the municipality is underway, servicing information relative to capacity of the sanitary services in relation to what is currently on the books from a development standpoint has been forwarded on to WSP, being the township's consultant that's dealing with the official plan review and growth management strategy. What will form from that review is recommendations that will need to take a look at future growth and what may need to happen from a servicing perspective to take on additional growth, whether it be through intensification, whether it be for additional greenfield development. So that will all flow from the discussion paper that the consultants are working on and the growth management strategy, which is considering servicing capacity for Elmvale specifically, but also the servicing capacity across the board, across the municipality. So that's something that will have to be determined and discussed through the growth management strategy and through the official plan review and update process.
CEO Brindley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to provide a clarification in that none of the work, and even what's proposed through inflow and infiltration, creates capacity in that it adds to the plant. It's primarily maintenance upgrades. What the inflow adds, or I'm going to step back, is currently if you built every single house that's available within Elmvale, you're running that plant almost at capacity. Just I think it's like 10% shy capacity. What the inflow and infiltration does is it keeps out some of the water that's leaking into the system. And our preference is once that plant is, once all the houses are built, we still have about 25% capacity to help us in areas when you have high peak flows and things like that. So as it is right now, this plant probably cannot handle any more additional land that's brought on. At that time, we would have to look at expanding the plant. So really the infiltration part actually just gives us more safety room in the plant to allow us in case there's excess flows. And I hope I'm not stepping on anyone's toes here.
No, and I think that's the clarification I wanted, that this really isn't creating capacity beyond the developments that are proposed. Councillor McConkey?
One thing, since you're all looking at how the wastewater, and that one suggestion I do have that you look into is that rather than, we do want more capacity, as you heard from Councillor Ritchie, growth or to expand the settlement boundary, make Elmvale a vibrant community again. Could we bring the waste from there down to this new exotic plant that I'm going to be having in my area? And so, if we transport some down to this area and we make mine more efficient, that could be an alternative to rebuild. So I just like the thought process to go there as well. Thanks.
Thank you. CEO Brindley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would say yes and sort of. we still have to process the waste in this facility, but any of the, what's left over would then potentially be transferred to the other plant if we would do, as we've discussed the other day, when you get into net zero and things like that. So what's left over from this plant, what's the term for that? Your sludge, thank you. The sludge could be trucked to another location and then be processed, yes.
Actually, you brought up a good point, C.O. Brindley, because don't we do something similar in reverse with Snow Valley? We haul it to Elmville. So, and I can tell you haulage is expensive too. Councillor Coghlan, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mayor French, and it's regarding the Ant Mills water tower. It says the project's dependent on the grant, and so my question is, if we don't receive the grant, are we planning on not doing the project, or are we planning on moving forward with a different funding source?
Director Coleman, and then I guess Director Schmidt.
Thank you, Mayor French. I think that once we know either way, whether we have grant or not, we could come back to council with a decision at that point. And if Director Schmidt had some other funding sources or ideas, then we could explore them that way.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mayor French. And would there be a possibility then to have, we'll say, worst case scenario put into the budget? I don't want to see something deferred if it's not. I mean, this is something that's identified and needs to be rectified. So I don't know if there's a portion of it that's DC eligible or not, even though there's new development going in.
Director Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Coghlan. So again, I think back to Director Coleman's comments. The scope of this project, if it's approved, if the funding's approved, then the scope of the project will include potentially new development. If the grant is not approved, then we will have to address the challenge that's in Ant Mills right now. But the scope then would be probably a lot less than what we're proposing here. So the idea would be is that you may recall some projections on our water reserve fund. And so right now we're suggesting that roughly $330,000 would come out of the water reserve fund for this project you're seeing in front of you. We would be coming back if we're not successful with the grant and providing an update, and it may mean we need to draw a little bit more money out of the water reserve fund, which we do have money in our water reserve fund to help for these types of events. So it's not millions of dollars that we're going to be proposing. It's probably, it might be double. So it might be another $200,000 or $300,000. So.
But no impact on tax?
No.
Okay.
And it's not DC eligible because it's existing. So.
Any other questions? Good questions. Okay. So that kind of deals with water and wastewater. Okay, we do have a resolution here we need, and it's that the 2018 draft budget and the 2018 capital and 6-year capital plan section be received. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Austin and Allen. All those in favor? Carried. Opposed? Councillor Hanna. Yes. Yeah, no, we're going to do a budget approval at a later date. Okay, so I guess the items that would you like dealt with today, if we can, to ensure that the items, the enhancements are included, and do we recall which ones need to be dealt with in case we've forgotten in the process? So if we could have those, maybe we can get resolutions on the table, and that way you'll able to update and give us an exact impact of taxes and so forth, so we're prepared for the December 20th meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, ideally, staff is looking for some direction from council as it relates to not only the program changes, but also if there's any other motions or resolutions that council would like to put forward regarding the 2018 budget. I believe there was some discussion regarding council's budget, and we've provided some input back to council on that. So again, if there's some thoughts or motions that want to come forward to discuss council's budget, specifically as it relates to the program changes, I will refer you to page 38 of your budget binder in tab 1, which is the executive summary piece, if you will, or the overview. Page 38 has the remaining, if you will, program changes that the township staff has been or is requesting. So you may recall that there's 5 program changes that have been requested. First one being recreation facility monitors, second being outdoor maintenance worker, third being staffing for long weekends for the fire, fourth being the bylaw enforcement officer, and the fifth being a co-op student for public works. So those are the ones that we'd be looking for some direction on.
Okay, thank you. So, Deputy Mayor Allen.
Again, I asked Director Schmidt, have you had an opportunity, probably not because you've been talking to us, to be able to tell us how that would be updated if we incorporated all of the remaining additional items that we're reviewing potentially here?
Director Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Deputy Mayor Allen. Yes, Mr. Chen here has included your changes already that have been made today, which I believe is a further reduction of approximately $10,000. So we are in a position to track whatever changes council may put forward with regards to program changes and or other resolutions. So we are in a position to track that information and provide an update hopefully very soon after those resolutions are made.
Follow-up?
Well, can we start then with, my understanding is the Public Works Co-op student at 11,859, the Parks Rec facility monitors at 36,318, the outdoor maintenance worker at 58,963, and the bylaw planning officer at 51,916, and the fire long weekend staffing 34,295. If we added all of those, what would that look like as a starting point?
I guess for the sake of argument, Director Smith, while you crunch away there, you know, on the sheet it said all those things are, for the sake of argument, 1.78% on that page. But what we can do
So
is
you're looking at a 3.09% increase roughly. And so that translates into almost what we were when we first came to members of council. So I believe on the township side, it's approximately just under $45 for the township's portion.
yeah. So if we want to look at it, because we did have an original number of all the additions in of 5.37 or something like that. So that is now down to, if we included all these, to roughly
3.09.
Okay. So we've taken about 2% overall out, if we want to look at it in that perspective. So the way we have it listed, and we can debate each, we have resolutions that program change recreation facility monitors be included in the final draft of the 2018 budget. I need a mover and a seconder to have discussion. Coughlin? Austin? Okay. Questions, comments? We have Director Belcourt here. Councillor Coughlin?
Thank you, Mayor French. I'm curious if this can just have an encompassing, or just, do we need one specific one? Like if we have one resolution that identifies the program changes, unless everything that we've been doing so far is if someone wants to remove something, we have a resolution to remove it or add it, but as it sits, I'm just curious for time's sake that the program changes be accepted, or?
Because we have discussed each of them.
Yeah, but what happens if someone doesn't support it? I think we've been pretty much doing it, if you want to call them line items, and there's not that many here, quite honestly, to deal with. It'll take us 5 minutes instead of 2 minutes. I think we should deal with each. So we have a mover and a seconder for the recreation facility monitors, which are basically a net tax impact 36,000, which is 0.33. of a third of a percent. So any discussion or further questions of Director Belcourt? Okay. Madam Clerk?
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify that these motions are being presented in the order of staff's priority list. So this first one has been identified as staff's first priority, and it's going down that way.
Any questions? Okay, I'll call the vote. Those in favor? Opposed, okay. No opposed, thank you. Okay, the next one, and I'll need a mover and a seconder, is that program change outdoor maintenance worker be included in the final draft of 2018 budget. Can I have a mover and seconder? Allen and Coughlin. Again, questions on the maintenance worker?
How much was that?
Oh, so the outdoor, it's 58,963 or 0.54, 0.5% tax impact. Any questions on this? Okay. Can I call the vote? All those in favor? Carried. Okay, the next one is the program change, the staffing for fire long weekends be included in the final draft. So can I have a mover and a seconder to get this one? Austin and Allen. Okay, further questions? Yep, the chief's still here. Councillor Hanna?
There was discussion on other options other than paying this full amount by having the staff allowed to stay home and get a standby fee and so on. So I think it's kind of premature to be approving this until this has been explored further.
Any comments from Chief Gavay or?
Thank you, Your Worship. As I mentioned at the last meeting, Councillor Hanna does bring a viable alternative. My only fear is that, we sort of threw a number around of 2 or 3 hours of pay for standby just to be on call. My fear is with the existing model, they're on call, but they could be in Barrie, so I think the response could be quite lengthy. And if I was looking at it as a firefighter, if I was to get, say, $75 an hour to be on call, or I could actually be getting $250 if that's the number that they make, depending on their rank. Probably $250 is a lot more to convince me to give up a long weekend at the cottage than, sort of 2 or 3 hours. And that would be the comment that I have.
Other questions or comments on this? Councillor Hanna?
Thank you, and I know that there could be conditions put in place with standby and versus having to be in Barrie or at their cottage. And I think that this, again, as I mentioned, I think this is premature. We've never had a report identifying any problems in the past, and I just can't, I'm sorry, I can't support this.
Thank you. There was a comment that we've never had any problems in the past. Is that an accurate statement, Chief Gavay?
I may have to defer to Deputy French for this, having only been here for 12 months. But to speak to the 12 months that I have been here, typically we have really good staffing during the winter months. It's not unusual for us on a weekend to sort of have 40 or 50 firefighters available. But when I look at our station that has the best turnout, should I say, year round, I look at Elmvale, and I can remember a time this past year where there were 2 firefighters available to get there. So really this project is about having, 5 firefighters north and south for a total of 10 that are guaranteed to be able to be called on during the daytime. It is my recommendation that you do move forward with this if you have the funding to do so, because my fear is that we're either going to not have enough firefighters, or it's going to take so long to get enough firefighters there to be useful that public safety is jeopardized.
Deputy Chief French, do you want to comment? Because you've been around a little while.
Thank you, Mayor French. So I've been around about 20 years now. As Chief Gavay said before, Our strongest station is Elmville, and I can recall a few times on long weekends this summer that 2 people showed up to respond to this call. That being said, you do have to activate another station to get the amount of manpower there that you need, and now you're taken away from another area of emergency response to come to one call. So it just seems with the lifestyle changes, people getting their cottages, sports, it just seems the long weekends, there's not enough people around.
Thank you for those comments. Councillor Hanna?
Thank you, and Deputy, 7 years I've been here, and this is the first I've heard there's been a problem. My suggestion would be, again, we don't have enough information, in my view, to support this, and I understand your request if it's necessary. It should be approved, and I don't doubt that. If it's only one fire service or one station that has the problem, do we need to incorporate this much taxpayers' funds to install this type of program in every station if it's only occurring in Elmville?
Go back to Director Gavay now.
Thank you, Worship. So as I mentioned at the last meeting, basically we have a challenge with usable space, I guess, to accommodate firefighters that would be, in theory, on shift. And the only 2 facilities that we have that can actually facilitate this are North and South, being Station 5 in Elmville and 3 in Minising. The intent of having the 5 North and the 5 South is that, no matter where the call is, we can produce enough firefighters, whether it's for a structure fire or a motor vehicle accident or a hazardous material incident, to get us working. I would say, as we look at the long-range financial plan and, changes to fire stations and development in Hillsdale and other places, that will certainly have the facilities in future years. However, I believe that sort of 5 North and 5 South is the best use of resources without taking up too much of taxpayers' dollars. And just to speak to the Deputy's comment previously, he's certainly right about taking firefighters away from another community, but what I worry about on top of that is the fact that it could take 5 to 10 minutes to assemble them at the station, and then I have 10 to 15 minutes response time to come up to the station that is being backfilled. And as I alluded to in the last meeting, we look very closely at our staffing using a web portal that we have set up that all firefighters are to use to show whether they're available or unavailable. Again, not really knowing how it was going to play out this summer, I never printed off those screens, and as I committed to at the last meeting, going forward I will be checking that several times a day, actually taking screen prints of it and being mailed to bring back a very thorough file for council when we look at whether we request to continue with this program in 2019, or whether we actually ditch it.
Any further questions, Councillor McConkey?
Just on fire and the communications, I remember reading, and I didn't bring it up earlier, I should have, I think that you're working on, I'm not going to say the fire master plan, it's some type of plan, and is it the fire master plan? I thought it was more than that. I think you're doing like a study, and you said that you've got a draft, which you started in this year, like November or October, and that you plan to have it finished next year. My problem is that I would like to see a draft of that before the end of next year. Like, if you've already started working on it, then could a draft be presented in the first quarter of this year, like at a high-level draft if you focus on certain areas? And one of the areas that I think that I would like to see focused in when you're doing your planning and stuff is to look at retention. And I know that you say we go out and hire in that, but to me, the types of implementation that we've been doing in this budget should help with our retention. And I would like you to review that with the firefighters, and I'd just like to understand if there could be a commitment of that draft. If you could correct me and tell me what the report was, but I'd just like to see that sooner than wait until the end.
Director Gavay?
Thank you, Worship. As with all things that go on in the fire department, we're pretty transparent, so I'm able to share whatever you like with you. I fear, however, that the report that you're referencing is a study that I'm currently working through, Basically, I've called it the Fire HR Working Group, and it's really to deal at this point with recruitment, advancement, and selection of firefighters. So, how we recruit them, reasonable job expectations for them, which are found in job descriptions, and their career path of how they get from one rank to the other within a volunteer service, and eventually we will get to retention. Something that you wouldn't be aware of is that we are approached by the province, as indeed were all fire departments. They are very concerned with retention. Retention was, as you mentioned, referenced in the Fire Master Plan. And I think Ontario has realised that the suggestions that it had are no longer working for, attracting, younger firefighters or firefighters that may be getting to the point in their lives when they have a little bit more free time. So they're looking to invest a large amount of money into reassessing how we recruit and retain firefighters as a fire service across the province. And I've actually volunteered us to be part of a study, whether or not we'll be successful, where the province will come in, talk specifically to our firefighters as well as the firefighters in surrounding communities. But rather than just giving us a generic what might work across Ontario, they're actually looking at giving us, if we're successful, a very much specifically tailored to Springwater report that may be more what you're interested in than job descriptions and how firefighters move from one rank to the other. But obviously I don't know exactly what it is that you would like specifically.
Follow up?
I just saw that a draft had been started this year of what you were speaking to, and that the draft wouldn't be completed till like the fall of next year. To me, that's too long for a draft. I like to take some topics, get a draft out. You'll get the feel of council a lot sooner, and you'll get the feel to go back and that. So I think it should be looked at more of a working document, and maybe that we have an education, because that way we're staying on track, we're meeting the deadline, and we can see what's in it. But I don't see why we couldn't see something the end of March if it's already started to be worked on this year. And also with all of this, you're going to have some people at the station doing some work, so maybe we can get something. I just like to see something sooner than later.
I think all those are all good points. I'm not going to ask for further comment because we are talking about the budget. That might be more appropriate information for a council meeting, but good dialogue, and I think expectations. Councillor Coughlin?
No, Mayor French, I was just going to add, this is something that I fully support. I think that this is money well spent. I think that this shows the firefighters that we understand what they give up on a daily basis, but more importantly, what they give up during their summer months and their vacations. I think this is a step to keep us from full-time, and I know that there is a progression of years and years and years away. We are growing. We are going to have to catch up, where there is going to be increased costs associated with the growth. I think that we're very lucky that this approach has been taken. I think that it is progressive, and I think that it is something that Springwater residents can afford.
Okay, any other discussion, comments? Okay, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay. Okay, the next item, need to get on the table. This is the bylaw enforcement officer that to be included in the 2018 budget. Can I have a mover and a seconder on that? Austin and Coughlin. Okay, open for discussion on this one. Questions? Councillor McConkey.
I guess it's, based on the discussion that we had with staff, I support this, knowing that there's going to be a report coming forward that we understand more of the length of incidents and stuff, so a revision to that. But with that known, I support this.
Just a question, follow-up, the amount, would that be an annual salary amount? Or is it that prorated with an expectation of hiring them by February, March, or whatever? I'm just curious, is this been already kind of adjusted, appropriately?
You're nodding in very different directions.
Yeah, CAO. Okay, I'll go to Director Schmidt first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to members of council. If you look at tab 9 of your budget binder in the program change for the bylaw enforcement officer, it does specify that it's only for 9 months of 2018, so it's not a full year.
Thank you. So, the CEO, Brendan Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and this is actually not on this point, but the mayor and I, just so you know, in the last couple of days have been back and forth with our OPP officers, and I'll give you an example. There's something called the Dog Owners Liability Act, and we've had recently an attack of a dog on one of our neighbors, and we're back and forth because this is a provincial rule, not a bylaw, and it's becoming very clear that our OPP office, even though we pay them $2.5 million a year, is now starting to withdraw service on many of the issues that we have every day, which to me makes it more important that we have an off-hours bylaw enforcement officer to deal with these complaints we're receiving from our residents, because it's now becoming very evident that the OPP is offering less and less service for us, and that's something the mayor and I will be taking up at the next CPAC meeting, but just so you're aware of the challenges we're having with our own OPP dealing with these kind of issues that they feel are beneath them, to be frank.
Yeah, I just want to add that it'll be an extremely wholesome discussion next week. I'll leave it at that. So any other questions on, nope, Councillor Austin.
So in light of the fact that you said this is a 9-month salary, in 2019 and 2020 going forward into the future, will it also always be for 9 months of the year, or will that figure of 51,000 or 52,000 be increase in future years?
Director Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Austin. Essentially, in 2018, the reason why we had put it in for 9 months is assuming originally that the budget was going to be approved later in January, and knowing that recruitment wouldn't happen until probably the earliest February, we put in for 9 months. But to answer your question, the 2019 and future years will include full 12 months, so that it will increase.
Other questions? Okay. All those in favor? Carried. And the last one we have on the kind of enhancements is the Public Works Co-op student, and just so you know, that's tax impact is $12,000 or 0.11%. So I need a mover and a seconder for this co-op student, Coughlin and McConkey. Questions? Director Coleman is here. Like she explained it fairly well. All those in favor? Carried. So maybe, Councillor Coughlin?
Thank you, Mayor French. And just the resolution to remove the town hall portion out of the council budget, it's 3 meetings a year stated at $500, so $1,500. Is that tax supported, or is that, it is? So I know it's only $1,500, but I think that council said that we agreed that town halls is something that should not be occurring in 2018. So it's only $1,500, but I think it should be removed.
Yeah. I know there was some discussion of maybe having the Hillsdale one because there was a commitment to it early in the year. Now, was there 3 in there? Was there 3 of them? So 2 of them can be taken out, definitely. Like $3,000 could be definitely taken out. Councillor McConkey?
Rather than taking them out, since they've been planned, I would like to see some of that money, I don't know if we can use it for that, but you know how you talked about a dog attacking someone? We need more signage on the trails that say dogs on leash, or else we're going to have a higher liability. So with that extra money, I would like to see that, but I guess it probably can't be used, but I don't know.
So how would be best deal with that if we, because for the sake of argument, there's 4,500 in there, and so if we take, 3,000 out, do we need a resolution?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to members of council. So there's currently $4,000 in that account, and the idea would be is that essentially each town hall costs approximately $500, give or take. So if you were going to only have one, essentially it would be a $1,000 reduction that the council could potentially take a look at, because we do have 3 proposed in there. So by removing 2 of them, essentially at $500 each would be a $1,000 reduction.
What was 4,000 was mentioned?
What was the total?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to members of council. So the 4,000 essentially was the full amount. So there was other items in there about the Elmville Maple Syrup Festival and so on and so forth. So we had also included in there roughly proposed 3 town halls at approximately $500 each. So if council is only wishing to do one, essentially removing 2 would reduce it by $1,000.
Okay. Councillor Hannah.
I could make that resolution.
Okay. Moved by Hannah, seconded by Coughlin to remove $1,000 from whatever. Special projects and events. So while we're doing that, Mr. Chen, you can update all your numbers. Councillor Coughlin.
Thank you, Mayor French, and maybe just, this is not off topic, it's budget related, but in speaking to other members of county council, was there thought put into the county bringing forward a 1% budget to allow more room for municipalities over the course of the year? Typically, the county comes in at 2, municipalities try and stick to 2, but this year, with the county moving down to 1, that gives municipalities an opportunity to go up to 3 without having any more strenuous on the blended budget.
Sorry, and what was the question?
I'm just wondering if that was part of the thought process in doing so, that to allow municipalities the room so that the overall budget to the taxpayers not more. I'm just curious if that's
I think both of us would like to comment on that. Actually, no. It's just think about the one advantage that the county has, unlike us. Like we'll have big development and we'll get the dividends. Like maybe in the next couple of years, we're going to start seeing the real dividends of Stone Manor Woods. The advantage of the county is they get an advantage of all the new developments, and it's pretty much spread out. So their revenue is pretty consistent growth, and we just felt that they could tighten up their belt a little bit. No, that had nothing to do with lowering kind of the local tax. I think there was a couple of municipalities were arguing that, but they used a different formula, which I still haven't figured out. But I'll leave Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, that is true. It wasn't reduced with the goal to allow the lower tier municipalities to increase theirs more. It was just looking for efficiencies and not coming at a straight 2% each year, as has been the assumption, when it was felt by some that there were efficiencies such that it could be closer to 1%. But it wasn't with the goal to allow the lower tiers to be able to therefore increase their rates.
I thank you for those comments. I just think that it's a great opportunity for us to be progressive this year and not have such an impact to the taxpayer.
I think we have been.
Yeah. Councillor McConkey.
I like to see efficiencies everywhere, and I'd like to thank the mayor and the deputy mayor because I believe they were strong drivers in that. So supporting it anyways. Thank you.
It's actually Deputy Mayor Allen that brought it forward.
Okay. Moved by Hannah, second by Coughlin, that the special projects and event line item in the council portion of the budget be decreased by $1,000, removing costs associated with 2 town hall meetings. All those in favor? Carry. Deputy Mayor Allen?
Thank you. Can you remind me, please, what we concluded with respect to, in addition to town halls, breakfast, Springwater sponsored breakfast in the 218? I can't recall.
Actually, I have CEO Brinley speak to it, but it's in the county funds anyway. CEO Brinley.
Thank you, Mayor French. To Deputy Mayor Allen, I believe this question was also brought up by Councillor Hannah at a previous council meeting. Those funds actually come from the Economic Development Fund, which is the $50,000 we share with the county. And if we would take that money out, we'd still have to spend that on something else. And we consider that. We've had a lot of success with the Agricultural Forum and these opportunities. So my hope is that, well, I was saying we can't really take it out, we still have to spend it.
Director Schmidt, as a wrap-up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And unless there's any more motions from council, we're prepared, I think, to provide an update as to where we believe things stand, subject to further refinement, but we are in a position, I think, to provide an update if council is ready. So essentially, with the changes this morning, we're looking at, from a township side of things, a 2.99% increase on the township side, which equates to roughly $43.23 for the average residential taxpayer at $422,000, and a blended rate of 1.82 or $66.59, I believe it is. Again, those are draft numbers at this stage. I don't see them changing, but that's what we have right now.
Any questions on that? Well, I want to compliment staff for giving us a lot of clarity as we went through this, and also to all the councillors for the really good questions and good debates. I can tell you, we spent a lot more time on our budget than we did at the county. Let's put it that way. And it's, you know, and maybe this is, I think we have a really good model, and I hope we stick with it. I think it makes it easier and less frustration for staff also going forward, that we are able to kind of drill it down and go down as far as we want to on the line items. And I found it very, very helpful kind of walking through it. And before I kind of table the resolutions, any other comments generally on our exercise at this point? Okay. I can read. What I'll do is, the motion that I'm going to ask a mover and second for is that the draft 2018 tax-based operating budget as presented be referred to the December 20th, 2017 meeting of council for final approval, and that the draft 2018 water rate-based operating budget as presented be referred to the December 20th, 2017 meeting of council for final approval, and that the draft 2018 wastewater rate-based operating budget as presented be referred to the December 20th, 2017 meeting of council for final approval, and that the draft 2018 capital budget and 6-year capital plan as presented be referred to the, should I say as amended? Okay, all right, okay. As presented, be referred to the December 20th, 2017 meeting of council for final approval, and that the 2018 policing charge increase to $228 per property for all properties except for farmland and managed forest properties, which will be charged $114 per property, be referred to the December 20th, 2017 meeting of council for final approval, and that the 2018 tax rate bylaw be presented, including the County of Simcoe and education at requisitions as soon as the tax ratios have been approved by the County of Simcoe. And the only question of the clerk is, when we talk about the 6-year capital plan, we did a couple little movements, so should we say as amended? Would that be appropriate? Because we just moved some numbers around and at least to recognize that we did. So that would be the only change to the resolution. So can I have a mover and a seconder for this? Alan McConkey? All those in favor? Carried. Did we have a loose end? Oh, okay. Confirmatory bylaw, can I have a mover and a seconder? Coughlin and McConkey. That bylaw 2017-096 to confirm and adopt the proceedings of council at the special meeting held on November 27th and 29th and December 4th and 6th, 2017, and, 4th, 6th and 8th, 2017, listed here and be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All those in favor? Carried. And the adjournment bylaw, mover and a seconder, Austin and Allen. That the special meeting of the Township of Springwater does now adjourn at 12:10 p.m. to meet again in regular meeting on December 20th, 2017 at 6:30 p.m. in the Council Chambers Administrative Center in Minising. All those in favor? Carried. So thank you, everyone, for your efforts, and that was a great number of sessions. Deputy Mayor Allen?